Hi, everyone. So I recently said that I don't like schools as a setting in fantasy books. And in the post-Harry Potter era, it's just a staple, like a magical university. It's a staple for the genre, and I'm pretty much always taken out of the story when I encounter one. If I'm pretty far along, or it's like a really good book, I might try to muscle my way through it, but I rarely enjoy those scenes. And for people who know me in real, like corporeal human life, you already know the basis of my reasoning. Or if you've been watching this for a long time, you already know. But if this is the first thing of mine that you've seen, just forgive me for the next 20 seconds while I do the most obnoxious thing, which is to give you a highlight reel of my CV. It explains a lot of where this is going. So I'm a tenured professor. My core classes, my core curriculum, several physiology courses, and an epidemiology course. I publish a lot in medicine and the health sciences. I was the director of a graduate program for a bunch of years. I've served on several governance committees for my university. I've been doing this for a long time, but for a much longer time than that, I've been reading books in this genre. I've been like devouring the fantasy canon, and through that whole time, from like kidship until commencement of my career, I had no qualms with like a fantasy school, like a magical university or whatever. I was totally qualmless about this. But a few years into my career, I realized they're never done right. Like on the page, these schools are never written in a believable way. The institutions themselves just make no sense. And I know what people would say here because I've heard them say it 1,000 times. You have to suspend your disbelief. Right? That's the line that I keep, like the willing suspension of disbelief is required for this genre. It's like, okay, that was a clever line over 2 centuries ago when Samuel Taylor Coleridge wrote it, right? It was already a cliche by the time Madeline L'Engle wrote it in A Wrinkle in Time, 2 decades before I was born, almost 2 decades before I was born. But cliche aside, I don't even think it's good advice. It was clever, but it's not a good defense for anything. Like imagine I'm making you dinner. Let's say I made you chicken cacciatore or something, and I serve you, and I see you sort of push it around on the plate, and I try a bite or two, whatever, and 20 minutes goes by, and it's all still on your plate. And I say, what's the deal? Like I worked hard on that. I spent like an hour in the kitchen, like you've barely even touched it. And then you say, I hate to say, it's like weird and gross. It's just bad. I'm sorry. And if my response is, no, you're wrong. It's not bad. You have to suspend your taste for the duration of dinner, and then you'll realize it's good, right? That's crazy. That sounds crazy to everyone, but that same craziness, it just applies to everything else. We should not have to ignore, like to enjoy something, to enjoy anything, we shouldn't have to ignore huge parts of it. So like if I'm reading okay, this next point's going to come across as like it's going to rub people really abrasively. It's going to sound pompous, what I'm saying. I actually don't think it's pompous at all. What I'm doing is I'm stating a fundamental truth about our world and our role in it, which is that mastery in anything has some enormous barriers. It takes a ton of work and disciplined labor and study and practice over years and years and years. That's what I'm describing. But again, it's going to rub people abrasively. But when I'm reading a fantasy story and the writer is like trying to create this really complex magic system, and they don't have advanced degrees in the field that they're manipulating, I get annoyed. I guess I only get annoyed when they're like encroaching into my field. I don't cringe with bad breaches of physics because I'm not a physicist. But when people are trespassing kind of clumsily, into my field, like maybe their magic system has a metabolism to it or something like that. Like I notice these things. So something like allomancy is a good example. When I'm reading it, just the voice in my head, the commentary in my head is so much louder than the words on the page. Like, this would never work. Let me give you a minute to just take a little intermission. I promise I'm going to return to the topic of fantasy universities and my qualms with it after another little tiny hike through physiology. But one of the classes that I teach is called stress physiology. It's about how the body responds to various internal and external stressors. And thermal physiology, this happens pretty early in the semester. And the first time I ever taught this course, I think it was 2016, I had to develop it, right? It didn't exist. I had to propose the course to curriculum committee, get it through all the administrative steps. But in that first exam of that first class, I tricked all of the students into reading a passage that didn't end in a question. We all know the title. It's like, read this passage, read this scenario, and then answer the related question at the end. But this one was just read the scenario and then turn the page and move on to some questions that have nothing to do with it. But the scenario that I wrote about, it was about breaches of physiology in fantasy. It's from The Little Mermaid, the Disney cartoon version of The Little Mermaid. And it's about the writers not accounting for how much heat would be released. I mean, an extraordinary amount of heat. Enough protein translation to grow 2 full human legs in a matter of seconds when Ariel is on the beach and her legs don't even get warm. And it's like nuts. And these are the sorts of things I notice when I'm reading fantasy literature or watching the movie. And these aren't like patient thoughts. They aren't quiet thoughts that sit back and allow the story to unfold uninterrupted. These are loud thoughts. I can think of nothing else. And the same is true when I encounter a university, on the page. I just like that's not how a university works. I think that's all that occurs to me. And I can't just Coleridge away my disbelief. It doesn't work. And worse is when I try to explain these things to people. I try to explain why this university would never work. Maybe it's like a financial system. Like, there's no way that university would still exist. Maybe it's enrollment issue. Maybe it's how a registrar works, or like liability. Liability is a huge one. It's not just FERPA violations. There's like egregious violations to liability. Maybe it is like research, conduct, and administration. Or like other administrative hierarchies, right? The governance of a university. Oh, maybe it's like even just something simple, like how a functional curriculum works, how it's assembled, or budgets and allocation of resources, all of these things. I mean, there's 1,000 violations to 1,000 things. And when I try to explain this to people, to explain away their misconceptions, they sort of retort with 2 possible things. There's 2 answers to this. In addition to the like suspend your disbelief thing. One of them is, I was a student, I understand how universities work, I was there. The other one is just as common, which is, my kid's in uni now, right? I'm paying for tuition. Don't tell me I don't understand how university works. I'm paying for tuition now. I'm paying for it. Okay, to overturn both of these, let's make this about me and not about school. I've owned 6 cars. I bought with my own money, with minimum wage jobs, I bought 6 different cars. I owned a Chevy for a little while. That one wasn't too bad. I owned a Pontiac. That one was really bad. And I drove these cars thousands and thousands of miles. And so I understand how the General Motors company works. You see how this sounds foolish, right? Being a customer teaches us nothing about the industry. Like, let's say the same parent who's paying for little Dylan's, tuition dollar, whatever. I just bought a Buick LeSabre for Dylan, and I'm paying monthly for it, so I should be appointed to the board at GM. This sounds so. Let's make it not about cars. Let's make it about video games, Zelda, right? I've been playing Zelda since it was dangerous to go alone. Every game, including Wanda Gamelon. So I understand software engineering. Hire me at Nintendo. I deserve this job. It's all so foolish. And the same foolishness applies to universities, where customers, when they're presuming expertise in something, it just makes no sense and nobody notices it here. We all notice it with cars. We notice it with Zelda. We don't notice it with universe or with bodies for some reason. Like with physiology, like I have a body. I understand how bodies work. I'll be an influencer, right? That endangers the public health. The former, not understanding how universities work, but thinking you do, that's merely annoying. But both of these ruin books for me. I hope they don't ruin it for you. I hope they ruin no books for you, because I wish they didn't ruin it for me. It's like literary anhedonia or something, where something that's intended to give pleasure fails to please. Or a better example would be, it's like understanding how a supplement, does or doesn't work, so I'm no longer entitled to the placebo effect. Where the placebo effect could be this wonderful thing. I'm just being denied that. And I hope you're not denied any enjoyment in your devouring of the literary canon, the fantasy canon. But that's all. I'll see you next time.